as Erislandy Lara defends his super welterweight world title against Greg Vendetti. The action begins at 8 Eastern on Fox and the Fox Sports app. And we are back here with Chris Broussard talking Blazers-Lakers Game 5. Originally scheduled for Wednesday, will likely take place tomorrow. For the Blazers, they'll have to try to do the impossible without Damian Lillard. Lillard posting this on Instagram saying, dislocated finger, lateral knee sprain, but this is good for the soul. Missed my baby boy. Broussard, it's good to see Dame's in good spirits. Been a roller coaster of a bubble ride for him. This is a series as good as over, I would say, for the Portland Trailblazers at this point, especially without Dame Lillard. Would you agree?
It's not as good as over. It is over. I mean, point blank. And look, even with the healthy Dame, even with the healthy Dame, Portland was not going to win this series. But now that he's out of the bubble, they're down 3-1. Look, with all due respect to C.J. McCollum and Carmelo Anthony, Yusef Nurkic, all these guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they've already brought it in and done the 1-2-3 Cancun. I mean, this is they're going to have to fight against human nature. Look, we know the bubble has mentally been tough on all of these guys. And so now that you're down 3-1 without your best player, they are really going to have to fight hard to avoid the natural human instinct to kind of wrap it up. And so I think it's going to be tough for them to bring their A game. And even if they do bring their A game without Dame, it's just not going to be enough. They're done.
And listen, I would go, I'm going to talk about this from the Lakers' perspective, Wilds, which is what is the path I was rooting for the Lakers? The toughest possible path, right?
That's true.
And part of that was rooting for Portland to prepare them for Houston. Now, Houston all of a sudden has its hands full with OKC, but I still believe Houston is going to win that series. And I do think there's an element for the Lakers that this is bad for them. If Dame played or not, they were not blowing a 3-1 lead. But think about the circumstances now. Wednesday's game was, when did they last play? Monday. They last played Monday. Monday's game was over, what, midway through the second quarter? Yeah. So they don't even have to be locked in for a full 48 Monday. Then Wednesday's game gets delayed. They're not going to actually play until probably Saturday, as Jenna mentioned, at the earliest. They are going to be able to go through the motions entirely and win that game. Then they'll have a few more days off to get ready because Houston and OKC is going to go longer. And all of a sudden, they might be back in a situation like they were in Game 1 against Portland, where they've throttled down a bit, where like they're not as sharp for Game 1 of the next series. Because it's almost human nature, Kevin, to take this game with no Dame up 3-1 on a team you just whooped, to lower your guard a bit. So, no, there's no chance the Blazers win this series or win Game 5. But I do think that, oddly, it actually is not the best prep for what they have coming up against Houston in the next round.
Yeah, I know that was one of the theories on why the Bucks lost to the Magic. When the Bucks looked across the court and said, no, Aaron Gordon will roll, you end up losing. So I could see the Blazers having a competitive game. For me, it's win-win. If it's competitive, I say great. We get to Broussard, your pick of Lakers in 6 is okay. It won't be Lakers in 5. You win. The other thing, if they lose, I want this. First of all, I want Melo to do whatever he wants. But if I could make a recommendation to Melo, come on back to New York. Come on back to New York.
New York.
You get us to the playoffs. You can mentor. You can mentor the young team, and we can give you your flowers. Here's Melo. He can still play and contribute to a playoff team. He averaged 15 points, 6 rebounds, shot 42%, 38% from 3. The Knicks have the fifth youngest team, a little bit under 25. So he can mentor those guys, which we saw him do with Gabriel when he was mic'd up. Take a listen.
Play hard. Listen, play hard. As hard as you can. The minutes that you get, do everything you can do.
That's exactly what I want to see. And this is the last time he was in the Garden. Played great. it's always a perfect part in sports, Broussard, when the visiting player starts getting cheers. He played fantastic. So I hope the Blazers win, but if they lose, I'd like to see Melo suit up in a Knicks uniform. And who was his old agent, Broussard? Do you remember? Broussard, who was his old agent?
Leon Rose. So
Leon Rose was the president of the Knicks. So I don't even know if it's considered tampering if you just text your buddy.
Perfectly.
Oh, I know.
Brandon, though. Hold on, Brandon. Brandon, you said we're missing it. What are we missing?
Yeah, I'm just sitting back listening to you guys, and it baffles me that how far off you are. Collectively, and I'm throwing Jenna in here as well because I'm sure her take is that it's over. Yeah, I'm throwing her in there as well.
I said it's good as over,
you guys have been covering.
Oh, okay.
Correct. You guys have been covering sports for collectively over 100 years. And if you guys know anything, you guys know the emotional toil on some players and some teams. These guys were the ones that walked out of the meeting. Do they even want to be here? Right? To me, I think they're going to play well. But do they have a chance? Absolutely. The Portland Trail Blazers, they're looking at this as an opportunity for them to steal a game. Now, will they win the series? Probably not. But you got to think about this restart for LeBron James and his team that walked out, said, we don't want to continue anymore. So, of course, they have a chance. Guys?
All right, listen, I get that take, and I respect it. But I'm coming from a perspective, I thought the Blazers had no chance if Dame was playing. And I do think Broussard's point that do these guys really want to extend their stay in the bubble by a couple of days? They thought they were getting to go home Thursday morning. Then the whole world stops, and now it's like, wait, we got to stay here even more days? I don't even know if they're incentivized for it. But, Broussard, I want to ask you something. Because one thing for the Lakers that, maybe Rondo gets back on the court because his hand's better and he was dealing with back spasms. Oh, yeah. But the other thing that's been interesting to me is, now listen, I advocated they sign JR over Dion months ago before the pandemic hit. They ended up signing Dion. They get JR only once Avery opts out and Rondo gets hurt. The way they have just decided after it didn't look like this in the seeding games that JR is ahead of Dion in the rotation, that Dion is basically a man that only plays in blowouts has been really surprising to me because he did add, even though he stresses me out, a little scoring punch off the bench. I do think Vogel hasn't quite figured out what his playoff rotation is yet. And again, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that in a game. I expect you to be winning by double digits throughout. But to me, that's something the Lakers need to work on, Broussard.
No, I agree. I definitely don't think their full rotation is set. And then, like you said, you've got Rondo coming into the mix at some point soon. I was not surprised he went to JR just because they were so desperate for shooting. And as up and down and inconsistent as JR is, he is a better shooter than Dion Waiters. Dion is more of a playmaker. He'll score off the dribble and things like that. But JR, we all know, and I even said it as lukewarm as I was on the signing. I said, look, he'll have a moment or two, where he gets hot.
That's right.
And he hits threes. That's what he does. And I think that's what Frank Vogel was searching for. So you're right. I mean, I don't see Portland putting up a fight. I know what Brandon said, but they're done. They're gone. And I don't know if JR will get to really,
for the record,
play with.
They're as good as done, not done. We got to go. Broussard, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Our top story again this morning.
Been covering sports for 100 years.
Voting to resume the
Broussard's been covering the league since the merger.
Well, I'm not aging every day. Every show, I'm getting older.
And the social movement around sports and culture. So what are you hearing from the guys as far as Michael Jordan being that person to stand in the gap?
Well, he's the chair of the Labor Relations Committee, so that's just part of his title and the role that he's accepted. And also, he has relationships with Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, all these other guys, that basically because of Jordan brand. And also, Michael Jordan still thinks of himself more as a player than he does as an owner. I think we've seen that over the past few months, the way his competitive juices are. And he knows the health of the future of this league is critical to how this is going to work over the next couple of months, or the next month.
Vinny, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks for getting up. Always great insight.
Great job,
Appreciate
Vinny.
your time today.
Room Raider gives you 0
We
out
got
of
to
10.
take a break.
Put something on those walls, bro. Come on.
On the other side, do the Blazers have any chance whatsoever against the Lakers with no Dame? First things back here, First Things First, and we now welcome in Yahoo senior NBA writer Vincent Goodwill. Vinny, thanks for getting up, hanging out with us this morning. Such an historic time in the NBA. If you would, take us inside the last 48 hours in Orlando. I know you're not down there now, but I know you're really locked in and dialed in. How did the players ultimately decide to continue to resume the playoffs this season?
Jenna, I think you initially have to go back to the situation that led to the Milwaukee Bucks deciding to boycott. That was them going rogue. Everything that had been done largely to this point had been players being unified and being on one accord and everybody being be it in group texts or sort of unified conversations. And George Hill and everybody else in that Bucks locker room decided, hey, we're just not going to play today. You know, you saw the scene of them being in the locker room or not being in the locker room, but you saw the scene of Orlando being on the floor warming up. They